Welcome to this session. In this session, we'll be talking about the concept of place, space, and connections. These three are the very fundamental terms in geography. Unless and until we understand these very fundamental terms, we cannot understand the more concepts and the advanced models in geography. So we'll start with the basic three fundamental terms. The first, as we said, is place. Now, what is place? What is the importance of place and why do we study about place? As we all know, there are various aspects that we need to study. The most important aspect why we need to study place is why each space or each place, I should say, is unique. That's our basic aim to study the concept of place. When we talk about place, there are four concepts. First, we can recognize the place by its name. For example, Boston, New York, Tokyo. So we call this as toponym. This is the first way of understanding the place. The second method to understand the place is sight. Sight is knowing about the physical characteristics of that place. That means this is a mining site, this is an agricultural site. So we are knowing about the physical characteristics of that place, and based on that we are deciding what kind of place it is. Third is situation. Now situation, very important thing here to understand it is a relative concept. So when we talk about relative concept, I mean we are talking in relation to something else. For example, if I say my town is situated 35 kilometers off Cincinnati. Okay, what does that mean? That means I am living from A to place B, which is 35 kilometers. So that is one aspect, that is relative aspect. The second aspect here is the aspect of centrality. Centrality means, for example, if I say Singapore is the hub of trade for Southeast Asia, that is an aspect of centrality. And the fourth important aspect when we talk about place is the concept based on mathematical location. Now, what is mathematical location? Mathematical location, I can say I am located 30 degrees north and 50 degrees west. Okay, so when I talk in terms of latitude or longitude, that is what is the mathematical location. So these are the four aspects of understanding a place and the uniqueness of any place based on its site, situation, name, or mathematical location. The next concept we would be understanding is what are the similarities between different places. So how can we understand these similarities? There are three ways to understand the similarities. First is space, second is the scale, and third is connections. Scale is something we have already discussed in the previous session. So just a brief recap of that. Scale can be local to global. For example, my local village grows a lot of lychees. So that's on a local scale. On a global scale, I can talk about universal brands or common brands like, for example, Adidas, Nike. So these are the brands that have grown out globally. That means a person sitting in America can purchase from Adidas, and a person sitting from Thailand can get a brand of Adidas. So that is globalization of the brands. So you can vary a scale from local, which is confined to your own area, to a global scale. So this globalization is now impacted a lot culturally. So that is what is the concept of a scale. Now we'll talk about the remaining two terms, that is space and connections, in detail. So let's start with the space. Now space. We can understand space in again four basic terms. First is distribution. So there are 10,000 people living in village A, and there are 1,000 people living in village B. So that's kind of distribution pattern. The next concept here we study is density. Density is how much people are living in a unit of area. So if I say 1,000 people living in 10 square kilometer area and 10,000 people again living in 10 square kilometer area, that means village A is more dense than village B because there are more people living in the same patch of land. So density is basically number of people living in an area. So density can be categorized into four variants. First is arithmetic density. So under arithmetic density, what we talk about is number of people living per unit area. The next is physiological density. Under physiological density, we talk about number of people living per unit area who are suitable for agriculture. Okay, so that is the physiological or the productive density. Then next is agricultural density. Under agricultural density, we talk about number of farmers living per unit area. And finally, you have the housing density. Under housing density, we talk about number of dwellings per unit area. So these are the basic aspects of understanding the space. So first is distribution, second is density, the next is again under space, the third aspect is concentration. Whether the population concentration is dispersed or clustered. I can say a village is a kind of dispersed area for concentration, and a metropolitan or a megalopolis is a kind of clustered settlement. The next important aspect in a space is pattern. If a village or a small town is developing along a highway, so what kind of development would be? It would be a kind of linear pattern for development. So these are the various, if in a village there is a water source or in a desert there is a water source, so what would happen is settlements would develop along those water sources. So it would be a kind of elliptical or a circular settlement. So the pattern of settlement is again an important aspect that we look when we talk about a space. The next important topic that we would be covering today is connections. What is connections? Connections is connecting place A to connecting to the place B. So how can this happen? All modern means of communications are meant for connections. So be it television, be it telephone, be it a mobile phone, any media or any means of communication ultimately leads to connections. So connections are made by, we call networks. So these networks promote the connections. And what is important to know here is all networks, you have a time distance decay function. What is time distance decay? Time distance decay means the longer and farther you go, the interaction decreases. So if I am going from place A to place B, which is 2 kilometers, and I am going from place A to place B, which is 20 kilometers, here my impact would be more at place B as compared to place B here, because this is closer and I can interact more, so I can have more communication. And time distance, as per the time distance rule, since the distance is more, my interaction decreases and the connections decrease as we go further. Now when we talk about connections, there are few important things that we must know. First is diffusion. Diffusion is the spread of any idea or any innovative technology from place A to place B. Now, there can be two kinds of diffusions. What is there? So the first kind of diffusion is known as relocation diffusion. What is meant by relocation diffusion? If I'm living in a country, say Malaysia, and I move to Britain, I'm doing some research on a particular thing, for example, in urban development in the country of Malaysia. And when I move to Britain, I take the same idea along with me and I join a planning department in Britain and I propagate the same idea in Britain. So what is happening is person A is moving from place 1 to place 2 and he is taking the idea along with him or her. So that is what is relocation diffusion, when you yourselves move and you take the idea along with you. The next term here is expansion diffusion. Under expansion diffusion, what happens is, for example, I am moving, basically I am at a place A or a place 1 and I am not moving anywhere. What is happening is, what I gave to the world, that idea moved from, say the country, again we'll take the same example. So the country Malaysia to country Britain, I can say China, I can say USA, I can say Southeast Asia. So what is happening is, I am sitting at a place A, I am not moving anywhere, but the idea or the feature that I wanted to spread or I had innovated is moving around along all places. So that is what is known as expansion diffusion. So these are the two basic kinds of diffusion that we technically talk about. Now what is important here is, under relocation diffusion and expansion diffusion, there are further subtypes that we need to know. So we will cover this again when we do the chapter on culture. So under that chapter, we will be covering the subtopics for relocation diffusion and expansion diffusion. This was the basic element of what we need to understand, why we think geographically, what makes certain places unique, and what are the similarities between different places that we can correlate with. So in today's class, we talked about the concept of place, space, and connections. In the further class, we would be talking about the concept of culture. And under the process of cultural diffusion, we will be talking about the various types of relocation diffusions and the various types of expansion diffusion. Have a good day ahead. Stay tuned.